Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon session on Skills Workshop on Village Savings and Loans through the lenses of two Pacific Women projects. By way of introduction, I'm your moderator this afternoon. My name is Camilla Angoro. I'm a program manager from the Australian High Commission's Program Strategy and Gender team. With me this afternoon, I have Ms. Elsie Mongoru from CARE International. Ms. Mongoru is a program manager for CARE International's Economic Empowerment and Gender Justice program. She joined CARE in 2016 as the Sexual Reproductive and Maternal Health Project Manager. Ms. Mongoru has more than 12 years managing development projects in Papua New Guinea. She has a passion and commitment to enabling women's efficiency, autonomy, and access to decision-making. Please welcome Ms. Mongoru. My next facilitator is Dr. Ignatius Mogaba. He's the Chief of Party and Country Representative for the FHI 360 in PNG. He is a medical doctor with a master's in health management. He has 22 years of work experience, in 9 of which he spent in clinical practice and 13 in the public health programming. Dr. Mogaba has a strategic information and program expertise in gender, HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. He also has experience in sexual reproductive and health, maternal child health, orphans, vulnerable children, and more recently, COVID-19 programming. I'd like to welcome all our online participants, those tuning in right across Papua New Guinea, and also in the Pacific region and abroad as well. So I've been through all Geta. By way of, I'll just be a bit of an outline of how the workshop is gonna go this afternoon. So the facilitators will run through the respective, approaches they use in terms of incorporating savings and loans model within the respective projects they have. Once they've gone through their respective approaches and in savings and loans, we're going to have a session on Q&A. So just a reminder, those online, if you can use the chat box, drop in your comments or drop in your questions that you'd like the facilitators to address. For those in the room physically at Grand Papua, you'll have sticky notes at your respective chairs. If you could write them down and give it to the team at the back to bring it forward to me. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Elsie from CARE to take us through her session. Thank you, Elsie. Over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm waiting for PowerPoint presentation. Sorry. So while waiting for the PowerPoint, I'm just going to run through the CARE's VSLA program. So the VSLA is Village Savings and Loans Association. The program is not new to CARE. CARE has been running this program since 1991 in a lot of African countries, expanded into Latin America and in other countries of the world. In PNG, however, it's quite new. So what CARE is doing is looking at piloting this model in our coffee industry support project. The VSLA was, so in 2016, we entered into an agreement with ACR, so Curtin University's ACR, to pilot the village savings and loans in some of our coffee cooperatives in Eastern Islands and in Chimbu. When we went into this, initially we were testing an hypothesis that if we had participants in a VSLA program, this participating in the VSLA program will actually result in an improvement in social welfare of the household. So we're improving livelihoods within the household. We were also looking at growth and diversification of income-generating activities, and then looking at giving women some voice within their homes in terms of they're also becoming breadwinners, so they're learning to save money. As part of the VSLA that we ran, one of the things that we recognized and what we wanted to work on was giving people the experience of actually participating in a financial, in a financial arena, saving money, taking out loans, repaying loans. So because for a lot of women in our remote areas, and especially in the places that care works in, they're not able to access these services due to our difficult terrain, geographical terrain that is. They also have, and then also cultural restrictions around needing permission to go to town. They cannot just go to town. They need to ask their husbands. They need, to negotiate bus fare, that sort of thing. So the program in CARE went from 2015 to 2016. And after that, we had to do a review of the approach that we were using. So in 2016, we did a review of our approaches and added a few more things on. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, so the approach that we used, so this slide is basically talking about what a savings group is. So before I talk about the approach, I'm just going to explain the Village Savings and Loans. It's a community-based saving mechanism. So women, men in the community get together and they form a group, and then they save money together, and then they have a certain period of time where they are saving. They have regular meetings that they attend, and then they at the end of maybe a year, they have a big share out. So they're sharing out whatever money they make. The savings and loans enables them to get loans from these savings that they're saving. They also have a social fund, which they contribute every time they meet, that goes to other medical emergencies or other needs that they might have. This idea of a savings group we felt was very simple, and it was independent and could be self-sustaining. And then because the membership is limited to between 10 to 30 people, it's very easy to manage and to be able to get together when they need to get together. Next slide. So when we went into this, there were several things that we were very worried about, especially working in the highlands of Papua New Guinea and in kind of remote places that we work in. So these are just some of the things I wanted to highlight in terms of challenges and why we had to take an approach we call the VSLA Plus approach. So in the communities that we work in, we have some very, very entrenched cultural and social norms around women's access to money and decision-making within the home. And then this also, in most cases, and a lot of times results in a lot of violence against women. We have extremely low levels of financial literacy in the places that we work in, simply because women are not going to schools due to other circumstances. The other thing that VSLA also, like the idea of increasing income-generating activities or diversifying those activities, we have very underdeveloped markets in most of those places. So we have maybe 1 or 2 families that might come to town, buy a bale of rice, go back, and then they're selling it loose packets. So the markets are very underdeveloped. And then we have irregular incomes. And then the other thing that we were very worried about in terms of forming groups was the frequent conflicts stemming by, mostly it was cultural differences. Sometimes there's a lot of differences within our own groups. And CARE's experience working with cooperatives has shown that this idea of building social capital within groups is not very strong. So a lot of times they have their own infighting. Someone else wants to be a leader. Someone else wants to be a leader. So the idea of saving money within that kind of environment we felt was very challenging. So there were certain things that we put into place when we did revised our approach. So they were, we had to work within a cooperative. So if within an existing group, a group that's already strong and can sustain the members through. So we looked at working only with coffee cooperatives because we were already working with coffee cooperatives, and then looking at trying to ensure that most of the members that are part of the savings groups are from the coffee cooperative. They're already doing some form of income generating activities. They're able to work together as a group. So there were several things we did around there in terms of how to set up the groups. We also ran two very significant trainings. One I spoke about yesterday was the Family Business Management training, which became a prerequisite for being part of the VSLA. So you have to be trained in family business management and also the financial literacy training. Next slide. Okay, so this is just some of the achievements from the pilot. We started with about 10 groups, so now we have 17 savings groups. So up to 655 members, and then we had a share out total to date. That means the amount of money that people are saving and sharing out amongst themselves was 235,000 kina. So this is over a period of 19, 20, 2.5 years. Next slide. I'm going to go a little bit quicker because I wanted to show the video. So I wanted to talk about what success looks like for CARE's VSLA, or Village Savings and Loan. So I wanted to do a spotlight on Neknasi Coffee Cooperative. This cooperative is based in Boana, in Nawai district. So they sell a lot of coffee to fair trade. So we wanted to do this with them. We worked in the Highlands, in Chimbu and in Eastern Islands, and we started in Morobe working with Neknasi. They have only one share out today. So we started working with them last year. So in April, they had the first share out, sharing out a total of 42,000 kina. We are doing some qualitative research around what happens within a VSLA group. So like initial findings, we're doing a whole review of this towards the end of this year. But just from looking at Neknasi, we found that women made up 54% membership of the coffee cooperative, or of the VSLA actually, the members who are participating in the groups. But they only received, I think, 44% of the accumulated savings. So this is something that probably going forward we will look at and see why it's women make up a majority of people participating in the savings groups, but why are they getting a lesser amount of accumulated savings altogether as a collective of women? We've increased membership. So this group is one of our successful groups because they went from 4 savings groups, now they've started 7. And they have, we have evidence of them using their loans to pay for coffee pickers and to diversify their income, basically. So looking at other things as well. But I wanted to showcase a video of our other cooperative. This is a cooperative that we worked with together with ACR. This is in Timuza in Kainantu. So this is a woman who is part of the group in Timuza.
Name mi em Doris. Na mi blo Bubonave lo tamblo houseline me camarade lo yellow Timuza. Nse lo Timuza houseline ne mo se one ne mo se sa pani wig lo le. Bisi lo ram kanto solo kapsiri lo abinu na monin ne mo laut. Bisi lo oliet. Na se first mo se walk garden. The plasante mo se walk garden na yam pla me pla. One got coffee garden lol. Sit down lo market or kind of say I have way block any money. walk lomi lo out in house, kolo garden, or garden, painim kai akam na pidi mo family. Mosem kofia, mosem main one me oblo me pla. Lo looking money so coffee garden and one plan mosem marketing me plan kind of say like growing cabbage. Yet is growing this like something now. Then back 4 years. Kaya all kisika me mose triple project all kisika me inside lo timosa. So me one club lo me mose BSL me stuff inside. Inside let's like BSL me mose me plus saving money from me plan. Can me plus saving money no say only school me plan same time you must get dream and law money where you saving. Time you dream and you must be straight this la money na inapin this la dream and play. So time you okay savings I must make straight na inapin sa dream and. And dream and play we put them also. Pani look out tika karuglo first training club in all give me player so one all been put in dream and lol kami wana mito selomie dream and blomi la house. First cycle blomi me been working and me sense in this like house here. Mose first on a mambo floor na kitchen mose me broke la na got one floor all this stuff na plus I use so me rousing mixing money now can me go buy smell me isi wasan lo namora me ka ito ke all boys lo same yet all smell team this la rousing me buy private me buy timber me ke so no ke kabot lo me me working na me small something inside the house here. And first cycle from me. Okay, second cycle, even kissing on me fruits na. Me to bani buy on me to antenna play box here. Lo first cycle and he come up with a box keeper. Okay, second cycle and we come chairperson. Third cycle we can't check this in. Also, no plus something lomi. No pani can sama na talk long in the house of I know sim so. No can something like you lining maybe make sim so you have mas look sim man. What one them all. So lomi was maybe open account lomi. Now, so we have account law on PSP now, so we use to mass law for saving money at Islam. So I know saying we look at a big plan money coming to law. Ilum is our saving. Man, Lumi, or some son and I made a one hour, saying Ximi for so me, no panic on straightening and yet straightening Domina, then we're gonna save him. Also lo side blomi lo rebel blomi me looking also kisilon liklik emose mol sampla kisilon lo kind of liklik something lo sit down lo table lo buy mol all something no marketing game this la kind so me no not lo this la kind something lo bani working so me pilem hat liklik lo bani kisilon meeting also me like simple cerebral blomi big plan then this la taso le mi pilem hat rigrig lo sen kind of sen lo baking loan and sen inside lo 3 months kind of sen 2 weeks me plus one so lo this line by one pla lo savings na one pla by baking loan na mi feeling mo sen time ni kisim big pla den this la na and by me hat liklik lo kan na baking loan lo me na pro this la 3 months. Tasol mi pun kisim lo 100 kina tasol na mi try mo sen lo baking amo sen 30% ya so mo se vol puti kwanta pa so 130 kina so mi plakan mo sen mi pa struggle lo meeting des la long mi plan inside sa 3 months mo sen mi try best trick tasol des la mo sen mi pili lo mi pili atlik inside lo sa triple munia lo budgeting lo mi no kam alright click lo kisim de stay triple days lo triple time lo bami baking loan so sample mo se mi pa pilim hamasta solo sema pipla something simpla sa pilim sem liklika se wampla something dem se custom kaino sema mi plasta lo place no man but the disla meriana pasine go senis na emi no giving to na disla kain so la time mi pesa pilim ta so mi pesa giving to sample time mi pesa holim kaino sema mi play Desle mo semen helping me play tulo how ba me play exercise me play at loxilo na bekim na desla kain semen nungut me play no exercise into na me play no na look sabe lo ne monem na bekim me mone something so me play inside na me play feel mo se mo I got good plan na I got nungut lo into sta plus something me to ke mo se sebi mo no na bin train na plus something lo so big plan mas plan thank you me play so me plan na sabe lo de something so mal make him na you plan cam na me give me plus no se me pa se me la bel me la big plan mas na thank you.
Okay, so that was the video I wanted to share. So I wanted to conclude by just mentioning that we are seeing a lot of women leaders come out of this, which is something that we are very happy to see. I mean, we do have a constitution, or the approach that we're running this is in a group. If it's a mixed group, you have to have, out of the 5 executive leaders, 2 of them have to be women. But we are seeing a lot of women who are saying that they're more confident, they're more able to stand up and talk. So this idea of only men can be leaders is starting to break down in those groups. So we are seeing a lot of that. We are seeing, like in the example for Timusa, Neknasi, where all these groups that they're making are mixed groups, they're still having a lot of women who are leaders for these groups, like half and half are women, so women CEOs, chairpersons for these groups. The other thing that we are probably going to be looking at is trying to enforce the idea of actually connecting to a bank, to a microfinance organization or a bank, so they can actually start saving money in a formal way of banking. So, that's a little presentation.
Thank you, Elsie. We'll go to the Q&A. We'll leave it to after Dr. Mogaba gives his presentation. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Mogaba. If you could give your presentation on CLOM's work and FHI 360 in terms of the village savings and loans that you incorporate in your project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Camilla, and thanks, Elsie, for that very enlightening presentation. I don't have visuals to show, but I hope I'll be able to give you a graphic description of what we are doing with our village savings loans programs. FHI is implementing the Community Lukatum Old Mary project, basically meaning that it's about communities providing support to women and girls. This is a 3-year project which has been implemented in phases, 3 different phases of 3 years each. And then we are currently in the 3rd phase of implementation. This project is actually focused, is implementation in 4 locations, including Aitape and Nuku in West Sepik, Maprik in East Sepik, and of course Mount Hagan in the Western Highlands province. What we focus on, we're focusing on 3 main components. There is a prevention component where we use the community mobilizers model to work within communities using different approaches, including peer group discussions, essentially to raise awareness on gender-based violence and also make people aware of some of those societal norms that tend to promote violence against women and girls, with the hope that when people are informed about this, they can responsibly and respectfully challenge some of these norms. The other component is what we call the response component. Under the response component, we're working with different partners essentially to strengthen provincial capacity to respond to incidences of gender-based violence. Although our focus essentially it's on the health sector response, we are working with the FSCs to build our capacity to be able to provide quality post-gender-based violence medical care to survivors of gender-based violence. But beyond that, we are also reaching out to other partners who work in other sectors of the response to ensure that survivors are adequately linked to non-medical services such as law and justice, law enforcement, welfare, safe houses, and counseling support services. Now, there's also the empowerment component. The empowerment component basically ensures that we are trying to educate our women as much as possible, but most of the focus has actually been using the school programs to educate our young girls so that they understand what gender-based violence is all about, so that they also understand some of the societal norms that promote gender-based violence, and by so doing, they are able to responsibly and respectfully challenge some of those norms and help to change them within their peers. But the most important thing which I want to talk about today is the financial empowerment component, which aligns with the Village Savings Loans Program. So what are we trying to achieve here? We are trying to ensure that women have the financial literacy. They have that knowledge of financial literacy, and they also have the support to be able to implement some financial programs that could enhance their financial independence so that they are less dependent on spouses. We do know that some of the major drivers of gender-based violence or domestic violence is overdependence on a spouse. So we do have incidences of spouses who say, women who say that incidences are provoked by requests for financial support. I need money to do something, I need money to buy this, I need money to get to the hospital, and then that actually usually would trigger an attack. So we came to the conclusion that perhaps if women can be better supported to understand how to become financially independent and to be able to support their spouses, that might also contribute to reducing the incidence of gender-based violence. So how did we approach this? We partnered with two organizations. One is the Pacific Adventist University. So their role here was to work in the 4 target communities that we work actually in Mount Hagan to do some financial literacy trainings. So most of these trainings were around encouraging people to be able to have long-term and short-term financial goals, how to implement some financial prudence and save towards achieving these goals, how to identify small but viable and less expensive business ventures that they can go into. So we did this in Mount Hagan, and we're targeting 4 communities. We had an average of about 20 participants in each community that participated in this training. So in all, over 100 women, including spouses who were interested. Now, we encourage the spouses to participate in this training because we expect that if they understand what these trainings are about, if they also understand how to plan and achieve long-term and short-term financial goals, then they'll be in a better position to also support their wives and as well as also utilize that information for themselves. Yeah, so we also taught these women or these target populations how to conduct some mapping to identify viable business opportunities within their localities. Then the next thing was, now that the women have that literacy, they understand how to save, they understand how to embark on small businesses. We needed to make the facilities accessible to them. So we partnered with another organization called the PNG Microfinance Limited, PML, which is now Me Bank. So what we did here was to work with these same participants to identify people who were ready, based on certain criteria, who were ready to access some soft loans. We earmarked about 75,000 Papua New Guinean kina for this scheme. And in all, we successfully gave out loans to 22 beneficiaries. And most of these beneficiaries actually used these loans for different things. Most of it was around agriculture. Most of them went into poultry. A few of them went into sewing. Others had small tabletop businesses. Others went into trading. A whole lot of spectrum of activities that the ladies identified and embarked on. So we gave out these loans, and usually an individual could access as much as 5,000, but often the range was between 1,500 and 5,000 kina. And I'm happy to say that these loans were actually given for like 6 months repayment period. And out of the 75,000 that was so far given out, we were able to recover as much as 68,000 plus. That's about 91% recovery, which was quite, for us, we think it was a huge success. We had 2 people who actually failed to, to repay that loan. And of course, this is some of the back debts that you expect. When you give out loans, you expect that there might be some back debt. So 92%, I think, was quite significant recovery for us. There were some challenges. Some of those challenges were that because we're dealing directly, we allowed the bank to set criteria. We allowed the bank to directly identify people to give these loans to. So there were incidences there were reports of unequal distribution of loans within the target communities. We also realized that some people actually use the money for other things other than what they had planned to. But the good thing is that even though they used it for other things, they were still able to repay that loan. And of course, I mentioned that we couldn't recover all of them. Then there's a big question of sustainability. So we gave out 75,000 kina, we recovered 68,000. So what do we do with this 68,000? Now the project was approaching its end date. So we're thinking, okay, so should we give these loans back? Because the idea was to recover and give to more people so that more people benefit. But we're also aware of the fact that we are approaching the end date of the project. So, and you need 6 months to recover these loans. And in 6 months, you recover this money. So what do you do with the money that you have recovered? So we thought we should be looking at a different approach, something that was more sustainable. And secondly, we're wary of the fact that there were those complaints of unequal distribution. So how do we address that? So one of the things that came to our minds was, could we now work with the communities, support them to set up cooperatives, and build the capacities of those cooperatives to be able to run their own loan scheme. In other words, they set up the criteria on who gets the loan, the repayment period, how much you can get, and all of that. But of course, they will still be partnering with the bank to keep these loans, to manage the loans for them. So we discussed this with now Mi Bank, and we thought it was a wonderful idea. And they said, yeah, they had done this in the past. Yeah, it could be successful in some cases, but of course, in certain cases, there's a problem of if you don't have the right people to manage this, you might end up losing this money, and then you can't recover even a dime. So, and then secondly, there was the challenge of the implementation period of the program, because for us to set up a cooperative and train them and set up this loan scheme, it takes a bit of time. So it was at this point we realized that Mi Bank actually had a scheme called the distributor agent model. So what this scheme basically is like, an individual serves as a bank. So we do know that when you move to the remote areas, how many banking services do we have in terms of banking institutions? So it means that people have to travel, like Elsie alluded to our presentation, people have to travel long distances to get to the bank. That costs money. That requires special permission from your spouse, okay? There are issues around safety of travels and all of that. So we thought that this model offers an opportunity to bring banking service nearer to the community. In other words, the way the model works is that the bank has what they call distributors. These are people who will be identified by the bank, trained based on and equipped to be able to do this service. But these distributors are also going to recruit what they call resellers. So these resellers are people who work within the community. They will be identified from within the community using certain criteria that will be set by the community, but also vetted by the bank. They are not going to be real employees of the bank, but they will be supervised by these distributors, these agents that will be employed by the bank. So these resellers are the ones who will be able to offer cash-in, cash-out services. In other words, if you want money, you want to withdraw money from your account, you don't have to travel all the way to get to the bank. All you need to do is to get to this agent, and you can withdraw an amount of money from this agent. At the same time, if you make money from your business and you want to deposit this money to the bank, you don't have to travel all the way, okay? You can pass this money through the agent. And of course, if you want to access a loan, these resellers also serve as agents. So you can actually process all of your loans and get it through these agents without having to go through the whole rigors of driving all the way to the bank and spend hours on queues to be able to get your transactions done. So basically, we saw this as an opportunity to bring banking services closer to the community, and also to directly benefit the community itself. So in Mount Hagan, where we are planning to implement this, we have 6 action groups that are operating there. Each of these action groups has about 25 to 45 members. So we have agreed with the bank that these resellers will be identified from amongst these action group members, so that this is like their own people are the ones helping them to manage these resources. And then they will be trained and equipped to be able to offer these services. But the community itself has to be aware of how this model works, how it benefits them. Because if they're not aware, then they can't take advantage of the services. So one of the first things that the bank is going to do with our support or with our partnership is to go in there and do financial literacy training, basically to let them understand how the model works and how they can take advantage of it. Beyond what I mentioned, there are other packages that come with this model, which we know that the community can benefit. In some locations, the bank has been able to work with the communities to actually implement an insurance scheme as part of this program. And there are other things like there's a special, what they call the hibiscus card, which is also given to the women, and it helps them to do those kinds of transactions. So we've also agreed that in identifying these 10 resellers, we've agreed with the bank that at least 60% of these resellers must be women, because our primary focus is with the women and in these communities. But of course, from the previous experience, when we did the initial training under the first scheme, we encouraged the women to bring their spouses. Their spouses were part of the trainings, and because they were part of the trainings, they actually supported the women in implementing their businesses. Some of them were actually running the business side by side with the women. Others were actually there to provide security, during odd hours. And we had also had a couple of testimonies where the lady and her spouse actually had a joint investment. In other words, she brings in some contribution, the man brings in some contribution, and they had a larger scale business. So generally, a couple of learnings that we've had from this interaction, and which we think we would like to share. One of them is the fact that in running the financial literacy programs, in discussing all of these financial opportunities, we need to involve the spouses. When the spouses understand what this is about, then they feel that tendency to feel insecure is actually addressed. And because they understand what their wives or their spouses are going into, or their wives are going into, they can actually better support them. Now, I talked about the sustainability, which was something that we learned from the old model, because loans were given, and then this recovery. So the project was ending. How do we sustain that? So that's why this new model of having the agent model system, it means that we're only going to put in some money to do the trainings and to set up the agents themselves. Once that is done, we're going to put in some amount of money with Mi Bank as a startup grant, which they can now give out. But the idea is that once that kicks off, that money will generate itself and will ensure that more people have the tendency, have the capacity or the ability to access more of that. So we might start with 10 resellers, and these resellers, initially, they're targeting 1,000 people, but we expect that 1 year down the line, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, that 1,000 subscribers would actually grow and give people more opportunities to access, to buy into these services. Now, we learned also something that, because we've been able to empower women with these financial literacy programs, and then with the instruments to access some financial instruments to implement their businesses. We have women who have testified that they have actually become breadwinners. One of the testimonies was a lady actually said, look, before now, each time I go to ask my husband for money, 6 out of 10 times, we'll end up fighting. And that's how it starts. But since I accessed this loan and started implementing this program, None of that is happening anymore because I go to my husband less often to ask for support, and so far that has us actually helped. The other thing I would like to say again is to emphasize the importance of partnership, because for us, we don't have the capacity to manage financial schemes, and that was why we had to identify the experts. So Me Bank was one of those experts that we identified, and partnership with these people have actually ensured that the scheme itself is successful, and of course, it gets better with time. So those are the few things I wanted to share with you, and I hope I would have been able to generate some thinking, and I'll be glad to address some questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mogaba. In the interest of time, we've got our last 20 minutes, so we'll just focus on Q&A. Thanks to those online who were able to drop questions on the chat tab. We'll go to our first question. This is to both of you. Is there any evidence that promoting more cooperative family decision-making in financial context could improving savings and increasing household incomes? I'll read that again. Is there evidence that promoting more cooperative family decision-making in financial context improves savings and increases household income? So maybe Elsie could respond, and then Dr. Mogaba. Thank you.
That's a very good question. Well, one of the reasons that we had to redesign, go back and redesign our VSLA was the idea of actually including both husband and wife, like Dr. Mogaba has said, in the VSLA. So we found that by having both husband and wife and then having them together working on a dream, like what Doris was saying on the video, they had a dream for their family, and then they were saving money in the VSLA to actually achieve that dream. So by including both husband and wife, we felt that they were able to make financial decisions together. They were not spending money unnecessarily. They were making decisions as a unit in order to improve their livelihood and the livelihood of their family as well. I think Dr. Mogaba might have something to say about that as well.
Dr. Mogaba, if you want to add on.
Yeah, so I just want to say that before we actually introduce the financial economic empowerment component into our program, we had done some kind of some survey called the Family Wellbeing Survey. And from that survey, we actually realized that one of the major triggers, of gender-based violence is overdependence on spouses for financial support. And that's one of the things that endeared us to consider, including this financial empowerment component. So, but since this, just like I mentioned, with our loan scheme, we actually did like a post intervention, evaluation, a mini evaluation, and we realized that out of 16 people who were interviewed who benefited these loans, 50% of them actually alluded to the fact that even though they accessed these loans, it was a joint decision between them and their spouses, and the businesses that they implemented were actually joint businesses. And I actually mentioned that one of the participants actually confirmed, attested to the fact that before now, they would always fight over issues of matter, but other matters of money. But now that is no longer the case because she's able to take care of herself for certain aspects, and she's even able to support her spouse at home to take care of some of the financial responsibilities. So there are lots of them. I think we are now working to do an online survey, which will also help us to understand how effective these financial literacy interventions and the loan scheme have been in terms of impacting on the incidence of gender-based violence in the communities that we work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mogaba. I have one question for you, Dr. Mogaba, through our online participant. Have there been any security incidences in relation to cash being saved or deposited with bank resellers?
Yeah, so the bank resellers program I talked about is something that we're just about to implement. So we haven't implemented, so we haven't experienced that, but this is something that I'm sure Me Bank who are the drivers of this program, of this particular scheme, would be able to share with us if there have been security incidences. But we can imagine that there would always be, which is why in selecting the distributors and also identifying the resellers, that is something that has to be taken care of in terms of understanding issues around security, where they live, and how much security they can provide to this. But I also think that one of the things that will happen is that they would also limit how much cash will be available to these resellers at a particular point in time, just to reduce the risk. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. This question goes to both of you. From your experiences working with pilots, do you think these examples can be used in other communities, in other locations in Papua New Guinea? Maybe Elsie can respond, and then Doctor, you can jump in. Thank you.
The pilot was, we started the pilot in Eastern Islands Province and in Chimbu, with the cooperatives that we've worked with in Chimbu and in Eastern Islands. So a few of these cooperatives are actually self-sustaining. So they do their own savings groups, they do their own savings meetings. We just go there to collect data from them. From the experience in Morobe Province, in a maybe coastal region compared to the Highlands region, I felt that, okay, this is also, it's working very well in that region as well. So what we're doing as a project or as a program is to try and take this idea of a VSLA into our other programs as well. So the first programs that we'll be trying to do this in would be our conservation program, so the Lookout in Ground project with USAID. So we will, we've trialed this approach, we know what works and we know what the challenges are, and then we will try and do that with our other projects as well. So in other areas, but mostly in youth, in Morobe Province, Kabum, and also in some of our places around Eastern Islands again, and then in Jimmy. So yes, we are trying to replicate this model in other parts of the country.
Doctor, over to you.
Yeah, so for us, we believe that this is something that is workable in virtually every part of Papua New Guinea. We do recognize that, particularly for the distributor agent model that is going to be rolled out, could have some challenges in terms of awareness, which is easy to deal with, but other issues around internet access and all of that might be things to consider. But of course, from what has been shared to us by Mi Bank, there is evidence that it is workable and is worked in so many other places where they are already implementing this distributor agent model. So I think just to keep it short and simple, it's scalable and is workable in virtually all parts of PNG. But we need to be mindful of the fact that there are also infrastructural challenges, which is actually more challenging in some areas compared to others. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Elsie, for your responses. We've got one question from our Grand Papua audience here. Have you thought of incorporating these different concepts with these SME funds allocated by government for SME through the respective banks? The government, sorry, I'll say that again, the respective banks where the government is banking the SME funds. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the fact is I'm not very conversant with how the government is distributing that SME fund, but I imagine that this will be going through the various microfinance organizations. And that's why for us we are partnering with Mi Bank to implement this, because we believe that besides what money we are going to put into this, they would also be able to access some other instruments from the government to be able to expand and scale this to other places. So that's just my understanding, but something that I think is doable. We have to understand the fact that because these are people who are government partners as well, so they should be able to access other instruments that are coming through the government to be able to enhance access to other communities.
Okay, for the VSLA pilot, we have, because we are also coming to the close of the project, same as the Clone project, what we're doing in the next couple of months is doing a market analysis and a financial services analysis, which we will be sharing the results with our cooperatives to ensure that they have this avenue if they want to venture into something like that, to actually access SME funding. The issue we have with our savings and loans, like as you've seen in the video, Timusa is just about 30 minutes outside of Kainantu. But the amounts of money they're talking about is like 100 kina. They cannot repay that loan. So they still have a long way to go in terms of practicing how to be financially savvy, how to save money and how to make money and how to take loans and to repay loans. So we want to leave them with that information in the event that the project comes to an end and they don't have support. So within their cooperatives, they will have that information, and if they want to sort of make their businesses, especially their coffee growing business, bigger, they will be able to access this SME packages from the government.
Thank you, Elsie. I think we can do maybe 2 more questions. So Elsie, this is for you. How do you help women who have difficulty repaying loans?
So we try to encourage, so we have, so like I was saying, we have a financial family business management training where we try to get the husband and the wife to work together, so they're accessing the loans, not really as a unit, like she goes and accesses it, but you miss a PNG, but you miss top pastem lo house, so mo bamixis la kain loan, na yuxis la kain loan, na bamit la wokiosem, na try lo back him go back. So the FBMT sort of reinforces this idea of working together as a family unit to take out loans, to diversify income and to actually repay those loans. We also have the financial literacy training, which we do. So this is the games-based financial literacy training that is designed by PAU. So we use this in the communities as well, so women are aware of actually how much loans they're taking, how much is their income, so they're not actually taking things that are in excess of what they can repay in a given period of time. So we try to, like we see in the video, they get really, really small amounts of money compared to like when we think about financial, like when you think about money like 100 kina, it's small, huh? Easy to go and repay, but for our women in the villages, it's very difficult because they don't have access to finances in the first place. So what we try to do is make sure that they're taking out loans which they can actually repay and not take out loans that are beyond what they can repay. So as a group, they will probably work together to ensure that the loans are getting repaid regularly when they meet together. So they have a support network that they work within to ensure that the loans get repaid.
Doctor, do you want to add? Thank you, Elsie.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just from our own experience, like I mentioned, we had like 92% recovery rate from the 75,000 kina that was given out. And I think you can't rule out the fact that you definitely have one or two honest defaulters, so you put it that way, because sometimes you think you've thought through your business very well, and it still does fail. And we had 2 people who did not repay back. And then we had one who actually said, okay, even though he struggled to pay back, but she didn't really make much income from that loan. The turnaround wasn't positive for her. But I think the bottom line is that the best we can do is to try to minimize the risk as much as possible, ensure that we are doing proper scrutiny. That's why it's important to train these people, give some financial literacy training, support them to do mapping and identify viable businesses that would not cost too much, that have less risk. And at the same time, the involvement of spouses, is very, very key, because we do have one of our beneficiaries who said, some of our beneficiaries whose spouses actually helped them to repay back this loan. So that's very important. Managing the risks is perhaps the best that we can do, and hope that we don't have many defaulters. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I have one question for you specifically. It's an online participant. Even when spouses were involved in your programming, did you find there were instances where this approach was not enough? So you've mentioned that spouses were involved in your programming through the savings and loans. Did you find that there were instances where this approach was not enough?
Yeah, of course. Our focus really is to see how we can reduce incidences of gender-based violence, by financially empowering women, so that decision-making is also enhanced. But that's just financial overdependence on spouses is just one of the factors that that contributes to gender-based violence. So addressing gender-based violence is a composite approach. It's not just a one-side approach. So financial empowerment alone would not do it. That's why there are other components like the prevention component, where we focus on raising awareness, helping people in the communities to understand the norms that promote gender-based violence, and also empower them to be able to take certain actions, responsible and respective actions to be able to minimize or address those norms that promote gender-based violence.
Thank you, Doctor. All right, I think this is going to be our last question. We've got 5 minutes, so I think we can squeeze this in. Maybe this is to the both of you. In COVID-19, is COVID-19 having an impact in the progress of outcomes in rural communities, taking into consideration the time frame and end of your programs? So maybe Doctor, and then over to Elsie. Thank you.
Yeah, so we know that the impact of COVID-19 is far-reaching. So for programs particularly, it's been very difficult to implement activities, not just to implement new activities, but also to effectively monitor existing activities. Because as your staff, you want to make sure that your staff are also safe, and you don't want to expose them to undue risk. So the contact with the communities has been reduced. Even contact within staff has also been reduced. So definitely, certain activities are being delayed. For instance, this financial empowerment component of our program is also been really impacted, because by now we ought to have set up the agent model, make it operational, and so we have enough time to recruit the targeted 1,000 subscribers, and also to be able to assess evaluate the outcome of this intervention. But all of that most likely may not be done unless perhaps we do have the opportunity or the privilege of having the project extended for additional time, and then we'll be able to have more to say about this. So generally, yes, it's impacted, but of course, as organizations, we are constantly looking for ways of mitigating the potential impact of this, and then to ensure that project activities are not entirely, truncated, but we find a way to still keep it up. Thank you.
Elsie, you want to respond? Any comments regarding that question?
Yeah, I think most of what CARE is doing is the same as FHI 360, making sure that we're mitigating risk. But I wanted to speak a bit specifically around VSLA and how it's been implemented during COVID. So we found that we were thinking that a lot of the women would be taking advantage of the savings during COVID, because they'll be taking money, and then because what we found we did a gender analysis in the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and we found that a lot of women are saying that their income has been disrupted. They're not making as much money as they used to. They're not being able to bring their coffee into Goroka. They're selling it to coffee buyers back in a village, which is at a reduced price. So we were thinking that they would be taking out loans to actually support their families and themselves through the COVID period, but that was not the case. What happened was they were reducing the amounts of loans that they were getting because of the repayment. They won't be able to repay that money during COVID because they're not making money. So that was what we found mostly in our groups. We have not actually asked the question of what they were using their social funds for, the money that they contribute for other expenses. But we do know that some of them took out some of their savings. So maybe we're thinking that it's for COVID, maybe, emergencies. So yeah, that was what we found in VSLA programming during COVID. But most of the time it's just, if they're able to access the markets, they're taking out loans. If not, then they don't take loans.
Thank you, Elsie and Dr. Mogaba. I think we'll come to the end of our session here. I'll try and do a very quick 1-minute recap. I know I won't do justice to your presentations, but you did an amazing job. Just to summarize, this afternoon we heard from CARE International's model of how they incorporate the savings and loans into their project. We had an amazing success story from Neknasi community cooperatives in Morabe province and the amazing Timuze community in Eastern Highlands province. We also heard from CLOM project FHI 360 and the amazing work in bringing banking facilities closer to our communities and the beneficiaries. I love the fact that you were honest in your reflections, highlighting the challenges in COVID that has made you pivot to respond to COVID, but also carry forward the work that you do. So thank you very much, Dr. Mogaba and Elsie from CARE, and thank you to all our online participants for joining us this afternoon. The Zoom link is going to be still open for further questions and comments. For details of the work that CARE and FHI 360 are doing, we've got our Pacific Women Annual Performance Report that's online, and links will be provided. So thank you, everyone, and have a really great afternoon. Thank you, True.